And we are recording. This is the Kubernetes SIG network meeting for Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. Why don't we start it off with PR triage by Dan Winship.
Okay, is this sharing?
Yep.
Okay. So I've got pulled up all the PRs which have no assignee, and that should probably get us through 15 minutes. So number one, remove Prometheus references from package controller endpoint slice.
I can volunteer for that. This is Rob Scott.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
It's just Rob Scott, right? Yep. All right. Ingress, add Ingress class to V1 networking API.
Yeah, we have another draft of this. I can work with Chris to clear up which one.
Oh yeah, you could close this one.
Okay.
I thought that I had closed it already.
Oh, this is probably the other one. And this is also work in progress. So do we need to assign someone to this now, or is it okay to just ignore it?
Yeah, ignore it for now. There's a lot of work going on the fork of this, Chris's fork of Kubernetes. But for now, feel free to disregard this PR.
You can put like WIP colon, I think, in the title.
Yeah, well, it's already in draft mode.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's got all the do not merge labels anyway.
Okay, this is also work in progress. Roaring bitmaps. That's like, I don't know what that means. But is
this is mine
here? Okay.
Yeah, but it's just a proof of concept, because the problem is that we have limits on the allocator and in the IP allocator and the subnet allocator for IPv6. So I went to one of these old issues, and somebody, I think that was Clayton, suggested to implement roaring bitmaps, and I did this pull request to test it, but I found different issues. I will write a cap and put the result. Yeah. So
okay. So should we just ignore this?
Yes. If you want to chime in and see the results and comment, just feel free to do it. But this implies a lot of changes in a lot of places.
Okay. Provide variant which skips sorting requirement slice. What is I'm ready with that? Looks like Jordan has already been looking at this. Has multiple groups, yeah. It looks like this is handled. We don't really need to deal with it. Qproxy, add interface type assertions for IPVS proxier.
I can take this one.
Okay, is that Rob? Or sorry, who? Andrew?
Second.
Yep, okay. Nope. Bad autocomplete. ED scheduler introduce ED test for pod overhead. This is a bunch of SIGs, work in progress, testing. People are already commenting on it, so we can probably ignore it.
Is that properly labeled as SIG network?
I mean, I'm guessing it changes SIG network related files or SIG network related tests. Actually, yeah, that may just be not us. Cherry pick. Who did the original one? Possibly Bowie. CNI timeout.
This one, I think they were just wondering what the threat was, I guess, whether warranted. Looking at some of the attached issues, it was like people were having some problems with this. I think it seems correct if there's bugs in that current release, or if it's within the supported release.
Okay, it seems like somebody wants a sig-network approver reviewer. So who was that? Rob?
That was Chris Luciano.
Chris Luciano. Can I want me to sign you?
I'm not an approver though.
I can take a look at it. This Bowie. You assign it to me.
Okay, I'm gonna assign it to Chris. I mean, just because you're not an approver, you can still chime in. Yeah. People who are not approvers can still volunteer to review PRs. No timeout when calling or when kubelet calling CNI plugin.
It looks like this is.
I think this is your linked issue. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yep. Fix unsafe JSON construction in a number of locations in the code base. We might have looked at this one before and decided to ignore it. Because this looks like one of those everywhere PRs. And it's stale. Yeah, we can ignore this. You factor common used metrics method into utils. Casey was assigned as a reviewer. Looks like kind of all over.
You can give this one to me. I'll at least follow up on it. Oh, it looks like it's a bunch.
Right. Although.
No, never mind.
I'll poke the filer. Oops. Another kube proxy cleanup, it looks like. Anyone want to review a kube proxy cleanup? Those are generally pretty easy. Probably not a big PR. Great first review task. Yeah, see, easy.
This, I'm working on this Satya SM.
What was that?
At Satya SM.
87375. If you want to put yourself on it.
Okay.
Okay, so am I doing something, or is
I
somebody
think we
adding?
got it.
Yeah.
87375.
Enough assign fixes. This sounds like another automated cleanup. It's a bunch of SIGs, so it's probably all over the place.
This is Bowie. Or yeah, just assign it to me. I'll look at it.
Okay. Work in progress. Break link to CRI API. Since we can okay, this is work in progress and a bunch of SIGs, and got started 7 hours ago. So yeah, we can probably ignore this one for now. Do not serialize internal types in component config tests. Actually, conversation 35. Looks like there's been a lot of discussion here. someone is already dealing with this. So we can probably ignore it. Add label to delegate endpoints control to custom controller.
That's
That's
hard to
tomorrow,
word
yeah.
as well.
I mean, I can take a look. There's already something similar for endpoint slice.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and assign that to me. This is Rob.
So this one is old, but so these were sorted in order of recently modified. So somebody has done something with this. Nope. Nope. I don't know why this is recent then. But yeah, update CNI version. Dan Williams isn't here. Casey.
Yeah, why don't
Condrell
you
isn't
send
here.
me and I can follow up on it and see what the
Okay.
deal is.
And it looks like it needs a rebase. So poking you will cause the bot to bug the reporter. Add tests for kubelet config.
Probably should has the same people on it.
That
As
doesn't.
Toppin on it.
Sorry, what was that?
I think go down. I think Mike Toppin is probably commenting on this one as well. It's related.
It doesn't really sound very sig-network related anyway. Nobody has commented in a month. But well, let me poke the reporter. And I think
Cool. You got through them all. Thank you very much, Dan, and thanks everybody who signed up to look at one of those. I think the next thing on the agenda was Clayton and Jordan to talk about some dual stack lessons.
Yeah, I don't think Jordan's on unless, I don't see him. So,
Hey, Clayton,
yep.
real quick. Some of the engineers that worked on this from the Microsoft side are going to be here at about 1/2 the hour. Do you think it's worth holding, or would you be amenable to holding until they show up?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'll let you know when they're here. So can we just pump this down the agenda? Thank you.
Can do.
Thanks, Casey.
So let's move on to Martin, I believe, for external name
Okay.
cap.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Martin. So this is a cross, let's say cross SIG cap. And in the basics, so today when the pods in your cluster wants to talk to the API server, they do that by, in most cases, by automatic discovery via the environment variable, which is Kubernetes service hostname. I totally forgot the name, but this environment variable today is of an IP address. And the Kubernetes API server, when it starts, it has a reconciler inside of it, which reconciles this advertised IP address. So this cap is for adding support in Kubernetes for this advertised hostname, for this advertised address to be, in fact, a hostname, a fully qualified domain name. So this has several benefits, especially in high availability setups, and it makes things easier, at least for some scenarios. The two problems are today is that kubelet does not support environment, the master service to be of type external name or to be a host name, not an IP address. And the second problem is that the API server, the reconciler today, it only expects an IP address. It's not a fully qualified domain name. So I'm looking for review, some heads up. There were some concerns in API machinery for that this could lead to some unspecified behavior or something wrong, and optionally some breakage. And yeah, so pretty much any feedback is welcome from this side. From your side, I followed Tim, but I don't see him on the call for reviewer, because from API machinery side, he was recommended. So if anyone can look at the cap or have some comments, it would be
Hey,
very.
this is Tim. I am here. I flagged it. It's in my mailbox for review, but by all means, anybody who's here is welcome to take a look at it and weigh in. On its face, it seems reasonable, but we'll go look at the details.
Does it cause any circular dependencies with the existence of
If we model it as an external name, then all kubelet has to do is dereference it into the external name type itself.
I see, I see.
At least this is my, without having read the cap, this is my guess at what it will say.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it only targets this explicit service, so it's not targeting any other services of type external name. And we've actually run this thing or have our clusters exposed via fully qualified domain name for quite some time. And we want to make things smoother, just to get rid of this extra IP address and have the same way also for the in-cluster communication. So far, we haven't have any problems. All the clients, what they do with the automatic discovery is pretty much they get this host name and then just put it when they put it in the more or less the configuration of the client for the API server, and it works so far. We haven't had any problems.
Okay.
Cool. Well, if you're interested in that, please take a look. It looks like John and Dan have already started reviewing as well. So that's in the agenda. Thank you, Martin. Next up is Sergey. Talk about NF tables proxy.
Right. Hi, guys. So basically, I'd like to present the result of work which took quite a bit of time. And finally, I have something to show. And basically, it's the kube proxy, which is using NF tables. For folks who doesn't, probably everybody knows what NF tables are, but just in case, so it's the evolution of the IP tables. They're based on the net filter, same as the IP tables, but it's a next generation, more features, more robust, more faster, basically lots of advantages. I'd like to highlight a couple of really big advantages in comparing to the IP tables. And the first one is the API. So basically, instead of wrapping the IP tables executable, you can directly talk to the net filter using the netlink messages, which expedite significantly the process of the programming. So instead of going through the reconciliation cycle as it currently done in the kube proxy, which is very huge and extremely inefficient, then you can basically react on the service or pod creation deletion immediately in the real time. So based on this, yeah, I mean, NF tables, I mean, they use some construct which already existing in IP tables like chains, tables, and hooks, but they introduced several new constructs which allows to add the scalability to the tables. And a couple of these are sets and the maps. So set basically is just the key value set as we have in in Golang it's called map, but in the terminology of NF tables it's a set. And map it's as well it's a set, but with the action at the end. So if there's a match, then there's a verb: go to, jump, drop, accept. So basically, what it allows you to have is single rule can address to the set with a very large number of entries. So instead of have a rule per entry, now we have a single rule referring to the list. And the lookup is extremely fast. So basically this allows to have NF tables or tables of constant size, regardless of the number of endpoints or number of services in the cluster. I've done some preliminary tests, and the results were so surprising and positive that basically that's what triggered basically this presentation. Based on the very modest cluster setup, I mean, I'm running a single node VM, so the update of the rule, single update of the rule takes approximately 100 nanoseconds. So you can basically see what type of rate of the changes we can deal with in the real time instead of accumulating those changes. So right now, I implemented a basic functionality of whatever I could find in the kubeproxy. I mean, I'm positive that there are some corner cases which I'm missing, but things like a cluster IP, external IP, load balancer, node port, it's supported, and I mean, it's working. Well, I was hoping in the future to look into the more corner cases, but I mean, with the time. One of the biggest problem I have is the requirement for the platform. So basically, to be able to run an F-table proxy, you need VM or host where the NF tables are enabled. The kernel module is enabled. And so far, I mean, I couldn't find a single CI which would support it. So basically, all the CI happens on my local machine on a local cluster. So that's kind of a problem. So if I could share, I mean, I could briefly show you how it looks like.
I'm not sure we have time for a full this call. Is there like code that you'd like the SIG to look at, or
Absolutely. I was actually asking for a review several people, but I mean, you guys are now very busy. I mean, if somebody is interested, I would really appreciate a deeper look at the code, and it's in the repo. I will add the repo location to the meeting notes.
Successfully fork kubeproxy?
No.
Okay.
It's a rewritten kubeproxy.
Okay. So in the past, I have said that I don't want to take any more kubeproxy proxy modes, and that everybody who wants to extend kubeproxy should probably just fork it and make their own. I am not an island. I don't get to make all the decisions on my own. So I guess it's open for opinions from other folks. My inclination still stands that kubeproxy itself is overly complicated by all the different proxy modes right now. It might be better, sort of all told, to make a different binary that is the NF tables proxy.
That's exactly what it is now.
Okay.
It's a standalone. It has nothing to do with the existing kubeproxy other than a couple of modules I borrowed from you. So, and I intend to keep it that way. I mean,
I appreciate that. It's come up a few times in a few different contexts, and it's a real trade-off. My lean is still towards it would be better if it was alone. So thank you.
Although there's probably more code that could be shared between the built-in kube proxies and external implementations that should be moved somewhere.
Not really. The way how the kube proxy is designed, I mean, it relies on the reconciliation cycle. The NF table kube proxy, it's a real-life reaction system. So every event gets action in terms of the programming rule or updating the rule.
So there's another item on the agenda, I think, which goes to this topic. of
That's
reusable
nice.
code.
Would that be kubeproxy v2 right after?
Is that what you want?
That would probably that.
Great. Well, thank you, Sergey. Please put the link to that code in the minutes so that interested folks can take a look at it.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
I think if you want to kind of try and move it forward in the project, you should probably have a cap for it, and we can, automate it there.
I thought there's a kubeproxy repo that's outside of. Isn't that what we wanted?
There's a staging repo for kubeproxy, which just has the config, like the component config types.
Oh, the staging. It's not actually a repo.
It's cloned out of staging.
Okay. All right.
But I would like actually to take kubeproxy. I think I would like. I haven't tried it yet. I think I would like to take kubeproxy out of KK into staging, so that we treat it like its own thing and write our own tests for it, a separate component. And then if we wanted to sponsor the NF tables implementation as a SIG project, that would get its own repo too. But that would need a cap.
Yep. Lachlan, do you know if your guys are on?
Yeah, thanks. We have Cal and Anish on now, so I think Clayton can take the floor.
Okay, I'll try to keep this fairly short. We can probably talk for 3 days about this. Thank you. It's actually from a while ago, but it makes the office very festive, so I think I'm just going to leave it up forever. Thanks to Antonio and Dan, who've been involved in this issue, and Jordan as well. So as part of turning on and testing dual stack, we hit a couple of issues that helped clarify some vagueness that we realized that we had never really dealt with. One of them kind of is the dual stack behavior around cluster IP allocation on services is actually kind of a novel case. It's one of the few places in Kubernetes where the behavior of the API actually depends on configuration. And so that kind of helped surface a couple of issues as we were digging through some bugs about why when we turned dual stack on, older clients were failing. We kept pulling the thread. There's kind of 3 or 4 points. I would say anyone who's interested in dual stack, I don't know that you should be looking at this bug. Antonio and Dan have been drilling in. I know a few other folks have been interested. But it's basically around the behavior of a complex API object like service when the configuration of how that behaves actually comes from the configuration of the process that's running it. So whether the feature gate's on is the obvious one, but the more nuanced one is what the service cider for the cluster is. If it's IPv4, the API behaves one way. If it's IPv6, the API behaves a different way. If it's IPv4 and IPv6, the API behaves a third way. And if it's IPv6 and then IPv4, it behaves a fourth way. So the long and the short of it is we uncovered a very interesting scenario here, which is because services can change type and we've added a new field, the interpretation of that field needs to be clarified a little bit. I think this will go probably as either modifications to the CAP or the API doc of we introduced IP family after we started changing the behavior of how service IPs were allocated. But that actually led to some complexity that I think going forward in the future, we have a field that can change based on config. We're probably going to have to go define the behavior of that before we add the field. So basically IP family depends on the cluster IP, but there's some things that don't have cluster IPs. And sometimes when you have a cluster IP, the behavior of a different third-party compliant or component changes based on the service IP family or the cluster IP. But if the cluster were to change that configuration under the covers, clients wouldn't actually know which way to behave. So the long and the short of it is anytime that we add a new field in the future that could change based on config, we'll probably have a new set of API review guidelines that'll kind of help clarify this. But we'll probably try to get to the point where we can find a default behavior before we introduce the field. and that default behavior shouldn't depend on config. So like the argument here probably is that IP family should have always defaulted to IPv4. Like if we could go back in time and undo this, we probably could have said IP family is always IPv4 except in these cases. And clients that don't see IP family can just assume it's IPv4. Today, because of the way that the config could change it, we can't actually go back and undo time and do that because it could mean IPv4, could mean IPv6. So,
so the problem with that, Clayton, is that there's clusters that only have v6 and there's clusters that only have v4. So any rule...
Before we supported v6, we should have defined IP family. So the problem was not that we support IPv6, is that we added a field that depends on config when we could have added a field that like when you went to an IPv6 cluster, it would have just returned IP family for you automatically.
So, but the IP family would have still defaulted to the cluster's config if it detected v6.
Right, but the field would have existed, and so there would be no excuse for an old client. Like before we could have changed the config and implicitly done it, we would have had to go through a release. So we would have said old clients that don't see IP family can't do anything. Arguably, adding the new field is complex. This is actually kind of an easy one because if you're a component that's working with a kube cluster, you had to go do work to support IPv6 anyway. And so this would be like any other ecosystem component, which is an ecosystem component can choose not to upgrade API versions, but then people can also choose not to use that ecosystem component. So I think network gets a little bit away with this for free because most times networking is relatively closely coupled. And obviously if you have a component that integrates with services and you don't support IPv6, you're not going to work anyway. So just in the long and the short of it is we'll have some new rules. We're going to be updating the IPv6 docs and KEP with some of the fallout from this. But if anyone is interested, please get involved now because one of the issues with this PR and what we found was that we can't turn on the gate to enable dual stack until the release after we get these rules clarified. Otherwise, someone upgrading from a single stack to a dual stack cluster would see different behavior. So we're just trying to get this eyes on this as soon as possible so that it doesn't hold dual stack unnecessarily.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clayton. So I think, sorry, jumping around a little bit here. I think we had Mikhail up next for back to kube proxy.
Yes, you can hear me right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I've got a link to some notes in the document, so I'm just going through those notes. So the idea is to refactor the proxy to try to factorize more the business logic on the side and the system logic on the other side. So the idea I had was to have a local model that's adapted to the needs of the local kube proxy things, and to have this model being watchable by plugins, and then plugins could apply whatever they want to apply, be it IP tables, IPVS, NF tables, etc. And also trying to have the duplication of events through an aggregator. So I built an intermediate model. That's what I currently call the expected node local state, and trigger events to the plugins only when this model is changed and not on every Kubernetes API change. The idea is also to publish that as gRPC API. So we could have local consumers. I was thinking of plugins, but maybe also things like core DNS with local resolver. And so that's what I started to do. I also have some code that's working, building a first version of a local model. That's what you can see in the test runs behind, below. So one interesting result I thought is that when you start Kubernetes in Docker cluster and you have an empty one, you have an event count that is rising all the time, but it doesn't actually change the local model. So it seems that it could lead to pretty high economy in time for all the plugins. They have much less events to respond to than the API events. I also run that on one cluster with 1,000 services, and it's kind of the same. You have less than 1% of API events that are translated to local model changes. So this is where I am now.
Does anybody have any comments or questions for Mikhail?
Do you have the design doc or something that you can share via mailing list? I want to get into the details of it.
There's the link I've put on the document, the SIG meeting document. Maybe I can put it in the chat here too.
Is it okay?
That could be shared, and it's the same repo where there's the prototype code.
So I think it's funny that we had both of these today. It'd be really interesting for the NF tables work to look at this and see if it applies. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I didn't help very well, but I think yes, it could be interesting to try to find the common ground and then have external plugins being easy to implement.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, thanks for sharing. Link is in the chat as well as in the meeting notes now. Let's keep moving onward because we still have a few topics to cover. Rob,
Yeah.
Scott?
I've got a couple ones here. First one is about Ingress GA. We're still hoping to get Ingress v1 in for 1.18. And on the last call, which was a week ago now, there was some pushback around the concept of Ingress class. And Ingress class is a resource that would allow additional configuration for a given Ingress class that can be associated with any number of ingresses. So it's keeping the same Ingress class concept, but adding an additional resource. The pushback, as I understand it, or hesitation, was that this is a fairly big change to introduce a new resource as part of a v1 API, and it's additional work to implement this as well as the service APIs changes incoming. So there was some question of how tied we were to this in Ingress v1. So I know a lot of people have lots of feelings on this. I just kind of wanted to get some feedback in front of a larger audience as to how people feel about the idea of an Ingress class resource as part of Ingress v1.
Might be worth mailing out and keeping all the people on the conversation.
Sure. Yeah. I can send that out via mail too. Sure, I'll leave it at that for now. We've got a full agenda today. Next is also mine, and that's related to a KEP I had proposed that suggested adding app protocol on ports for services and endpoints. And this is something like that came out of several long-standing issues. The discussion in that KEP PR came to a suggestion of there are lots of use cases where multiple app protocols are relevant for the same port. Is there a reason we would want to limit this to specify a single application protocol as opposed to multiple app protocols, or at least allowing multiple app protocols? That's the state of the KEP right now, and since the enhancement freeze is 5 days away, I just wanted to get general feedback on the idea of, instead of a single app protocol, multiple app protocols per port, optionally.
I didn't really see a whole lot of point in it.
Okay.
I mean, I was looking for a compelling use case for multiple, and I didn't see one that wasn't sort of impliable by the top one. Right? If you have a stack of protocols, like HTTP is built on TCP, like you don't need to say limit.
Sure. Okay.
But it might not be always program. Like HTTP is based on quick. HTTP doesn't like.
Sure, but you'd say HTTP3, not. Sorry, for people.
If you guys there are speaking, it's kind of hard to hear you when you're not looking at.
I was just clarifying whether the protocol will be HTTP or will be HTTP2 or HTTP3, because HTTP3, for example, will be quick, UDP based or not TCP based, right? But if you are specific enough that you can only do it on one protocol, then yes.
Also that, yeah, this is an app protocol, so you'd say UDP and quick actually. So HTTP is maybe a bad example. Maybe the example somebody said was gRPC on HTTP2 on TCP. Like, I guess I just don't see it as super compelling. I'm happy to be wrong.
The thing is, the consumer is kind of outside of anything that currently, there's nothing inside Kubernetes currently that kind of triggers on it.
Right.
It's almost like a pure description.
It is pure description, not almost.
Someone would have to find a compelling example. And we do know how to pluralize.
That's right.
That's what we say that.
We know how to pluralize it later.
So that would be my feeling. I'm happy to go look at the KEP again, but I think I said that on the KEP.
Okay. Easy enough.
Anybody disagrees, like, speak up.
Nothing for me. It's very difficult to hear you guys when you're not looking right at the
sorry.
Your microphone there.
Yeah, our room is weird.
Yeah, if anybody has other strong opinions on that, I think they'll have to go to the KEP.
Okay.
But that sounds like it's a good one. Dan Winship.
I can go, or if Rob wants to finish up his items.
No, go ahead. I've taken enough time. Thanks.
All right. So so there was this problem with IP tables 1.8 and its two different modes, and containers like kubeproxy and network plugins having problem on recent Fedora and RHEL and Debian, where they're using a different mode than the container was expecting. We finally worked around it in Kube 117 with the wrapper script in the kubeproxy image, and now I've sort of abstracted that out, created a repo so that other people who need to use it, like network plugins that want to be able to support multiple distros, could just grab that wrapper and get support. And I wanted to get this adopted as a SIG project so that we could have it moved into a Kubernetes SIG repo. And that requires, you know, official sponsorship and approval from the SIG, which actually has to be in written form somewhere. So I guess I probably have to send email, and then the SIG leads can respond to the email and say, yes, we approve of this. But so if you think this sounds like a terrible idea, then I guess be prepared to jump in on the mailing list and say no. Otherwise, or if you think it sounds good, then chime in with your support. So yeah, I should send email to the list.
I think if you're creating a new repo, we just open an issue, and then having people approve it.
I mean, there's like all this process, and it says that if you want a Kubernetes SIGs repo, you need, you open an issue, but you have to include a link to the sponsoring SIG officially saying, yes, we sponsor this project.
Oh, I see. We just got people to comment on the issue, and there was no like separate thing.
Yeah, it would seem like approvals on the issue.
Yeah.
Just not a PR.
I'm just trying to save you some red tape.
We can try, but yeah. Sending emails is not that much red tape. So.
Great. Well, we'll anxiously await your email, Dan. Cool. I think that brings us just back to Rob.
Okay. Yeah, this is my last one, and this is just on service topology and seeing if there's anything we want to get into the next release. I think right now there's not much. One of the things that seems obvious right now is there's no endpoint slice is what service topology is based on in its current iteration, and endpoint slice currently just hard codes understanding node, zone, and region topology keys. So the whole idea with service topology keys is that you could support arbitrary keys beyond that, and endpoint slice does not. So a question is it worthwhile to have endpoint slice controller set arbitrary, whatever topology keys match the service? And on that note, if that makes sense, should they only match whatever is set in the service and exclude anything that isn't? So as an example, if topology keys are empty on the service, don't set anything inside the endpoint slice topology. I know Andrew had also mentioned something along these lines. So if he's on the call, interested in feedback there as well.
I think not defaulting to any of them and then just using what's in the service makes the most sense.
Okay.
And then users would use like the most common ones in most cases.
Okay.
I agree.
Cool. So one of the things I was stuck on a bit is that because we at least have this concept that endpoint slices may be consumed by more things than kube proxy, is there value in having a base set of topology keys, such as the ones that are already set, always being set regardless of what the service specifies? So for a given endpoint slice, endpoint in an endpoint slice, the node, zone, and region, even if the service doesn't say up front that it cares about that, or is that too much of a stretch?
I understand the rationale for wanting to put something there.
Yeah.
But unless we have a really concrete use case, I would just not. I mean, we can always add that. That doesn't seem problematic in the least. But if nobody's really calling for it, I don't see why we should do it.
Okay.
Show me one good use case, and I think it's reasonable.
So using today copies the best fixed set, and now you're going to look at the service and what's contained in the service.
Yeah, in a sense, it's actually degrading the level of information or downgrading the level of information available in an endpoint slice, because we're going from always having node, zone, and region to maybe having those if they happen to be specified on the service. Admittedly, nothing is being done with those keys right now. But unless you've enabled topology. Yeah. Okay. yeah, if anyone else is interested in service topology and getting things in for 118, I'm interested in helping on that front. So reach out to me if there's things that are missing that would be good to have in 118.
I think one other topic that came up the last release was whether we need to create a special case for, or if we need to create an equivalent case in service topology for external traffic policy local.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like external traffic policy local is like a special edge case we have, and if a user specifies only the Kubernetes hostname as the topology key, then should we treat it as a special edge case, or is it just a generic case? Yeah, so I think we need to hash that out a bit.
Yeah, I agree. That is one of the biggest open issues that I see with topology. I'm happy to hash it out, but we've got less than a week before enhancements freeze. So
yeah.
Okay.
So the remaining thing with that is headless services. That's not
the DNS stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that work isn't done. The DNS pod locator stuff is not done. The implication here is like absent somebody who's really pushing on this, like so many other things, it just isn't getting done. Yeah.
At the very least, I'll try and get the endpoint slice changes in, and if there's anything else that's easy, I'll try and tackle it. But, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. That brings us to the end of the agenda. We've got a couple minutes left. If there are any other last-minute words people want to get in.
I got feedback from the KubeCon EU about our deep dive intro session. I emailed, unfortunately, they said, we can only give you a 35-minute session, which is, yeah, which is pretty insane.
One session.
I emailed back asking, like, this probably won't fit. I will send out more information about if you're going to be there, then we can see who's interested in helping present. 35 minutes, you'll have to talk real fast.
35 minutes for what we used to do in 90?
Yeah.
Well, apparently they screwed up. We weren't supposed to get them. Like, SIG's only cloud. Like, I don't think SIG were supposed to get to.
I think I've been reading all the threads with CNCF. Yeah. It's very ambiguous, the wording around what's going on. I read it as all SIGs get one session, and cloud provider sub-projects as a special case get a session.
Interesting.
Sub-project, yes,
independently, but no other sub-projects. So like cluster API people, I think, are frustrated because they want to do a subsection that's not SIG cluster lifecycle, but just cluster API, and they were told no. Right. But I thought that every SIG was going to get a session. 35 minutes for a joined intro deep dive isn't going to fly. So,
yeah, it was interesting because the form that was sent out actually explicitly said, do you want a 90-minute session?
But that's for projects, not for SIGs.
Oh, really?
So other projects, so like CoreDNS we get to. But for the SIG,
this one?
I'm not doing either of them this time.
The last thing I read from the CNCF staff is, look, there's a shortage of rooms for a number of SIGs and projects that want to talk, and I'm not inclined to fight real hard to get a longer session. I think we should take our 35 minutes, post-mortem this, and figure out, like, as a community, why is KubeCon too full for Kube projects to talk, and we can move forward from there.
Okay.
So 35 minutes is an intro. It's not a deep dive.
Yeah. All right. I will be sending out info. So if you are interested, please watch for that email.
When there were 7 CNCF projects, like I think
there's like 30.
Yeah, there's like all the sandbox don't get it. They would need to all get 2 sessions.
All right.
You need to break Kubernetes into small pieces.
Kube proxy into a CNCF project.
Absolutely. Do that.
All right.
I have a lot of SIG, a lot of KEPs and PRs backed up. I apologize. I am slowly getting through them now. For people who are up against the feature freeze, If you are waiting for me, this is Tim, if you're waiting for me to touch your KEP, feel free to ping me on Slack or other, and I will do my damnedest to look at it. If the KEP is not assigned to me, I probably will not see it. So if you want me to look at it, make sure it's assigned to me, and then ping me. And don't be shy.
Thanks, Tim. See everybody in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Just for the Proxy V2, at the current level,